Welcome to WikiPodcast.
It's great to be here.
Today we're diving deep into a powerful and often explosive intersection,
Mm.
religion and war.
Specifically, why religions go to battle. It's a heavy one.
It really is. The sources you've given us paint a fascinating and sometimes, well, unsettling picture.
Definitely. It covers everything from basic definitions right through centuries of conflict across so many different faiths.
Our mission today is to try and cut through some of those complexities, really understand what drives these so-called holy wars.
Yeah, we've got different scholarly takes on what even counts as a religious war.
Right, and some pretty eye-opening ideas about whether our modern idea of religion even fits historically.
And just a huge timeline of conflicts to look at.
Okay, let's unpack this. Where do we even start defining it, I guess?
Seems like the place. It's a minefield right away because even defining religious war, well, scholars fiercely debate it.
Okay.
The Wikipedia entry gives us a few angles. Conrad Repton suggests a war is religious if at least one side uses religion or religious law to justify it.
As a bellemistum, a just war.
Exactly. So it's about the official reasoning, the public case they make for war.
Right, the justification on paper,
Yeah.
kind of. But Philip Benedict pushes back on that, doesn't he? Says it's too narrow.
He does. He argues that both the stated reasons and the real underlying motivations can be religious.
That makes more sense, intuitively. Leaders might genuinely believe they're fighting for faith, even if they frame it differently sometimes.
Precisely. And David Onekink adds another layer, another distinction
Okay.
between religious war and holy war, or bellum sacrum.
Ah, right. Holy war.
He points out that a religious war, well, it can be fought by secular leaders, regular soldiers, maybe for religious goals like protecting co-religionists.
Well,
But a holy war typically needs formal religious backing, authorization.
yeah.
And the combatants are often driven by deep religious conviction.
So, okay, like a Protestant king hiring mercenaries to fight a Catholic empire that could be a religious war, maybe to protect his subject.
Yeah, possibly.
But maybe not a holy war for
Right.
every soldier involved.
Right. Whereas the Crusades, with the Pope's blessing and knights, seeing it as serving God directly.
That feels much more like the holy label fits. Definitely.
Yeah.
But this makes you wonder, are these categories ever really that clean? Or is it always kind of a messy mix?
That's the crucial point. And it leads to some scholars questioning if the whole idea of a separate category of religious war even makes sense.
Really? Why is that?
Well, John Morial and Tamara Sun highlight that we don't even have a universal agreement on what religion is.
Good point.
So how can we confidently label a war as being about religion if the concept itself is so, fluid and so tied up with social, political, economic stuff?
It's like trying to isolate one ingredient in a really complex stew. It's in there, it matters, but you can't completely pull it apart from everything else.
Exactly. And the theologian William T. Cavanaugh takes this even further. This is where it gets really interesting. He basically argues that religion, as we think of it, this distinct thing with its own doctrines and practices, separate from politics or economics, is actually a relatively recent invention, a Western one.
Whoa, a modern invention. So applying it backwards
Yeah.
is problematic.
That's his argument. He suggests that all the wars we label religious have significant secular roots and consequences anyway.
And the sources back this up.
They do, with some fascinating examples. Like, Hebrew apparently doesn't have a direct equivalent for our word religion.
No kidding.
And the Arabic word deen in the Quran, historically, it was often translated more like law.
Law, not religion.
Interesting.
And even terms like Buddhism, Hinduism, Taoism, Confucianism, those are relatively new labels, mostly from the 19th century.
Wow.
Japan didn't even really have a concept of religion in our sense until they were kind of forced to deal with Western ideas in the mid-19th century.
That's actually mind-blowing. So when we talk about, say, ancient conflicts as religious wars, we might be projecting our modern categories onto societies that didn't think that way at all. That's the concern, yeah. It makes you seriously question how much our own viewpoint shapes how we read history.
It's like trying to analyze a medieval tapestry using 21st century artistic terms. The framework itself didn't exist back then.
Exactly. If the people involved didn't see religion as this totally separate sphere, how can we say their wars were primarily about it?
So it suggests these conflicts were probably driven by a more integrated worldview, where religion, law, power, social order, it was all kind of woven together.
That seems likely. Which completely shifts how we think about how common religious wars have actually been.
Right. The Encyclopedia of Wars has that statistic. It suggests only a small fraction. What was it, around 7%?
Yeah, about 7% had religion as the primary cause.
That feels low somehow, given the narrative.
It is surprising, isn't it? But the source also notes a really important historical shift.
Good.
Before the 17th century, even if religion wasn't the only cause, using religious justifications for war was super common.
Ah, okay. So it was the standard way to frame things.
Often, yes. But after that period, you see justifications shifting more towards the interests of the sovereign state. Nationalism, political power, that sort of thing.
And Kalevi-Holsty's research fits here too, right?
Yeah.
Protecting co-religionists was a big factor in wars between, say, 1648 and 1914.
A significant factor, yeah. But then it drops way down, practically to zero, after World War I, according to his data.
But then other things pop up, like ethnic or religious unification becomes more prominent later.
Exactly. So the way religion intersects with war clearly isn't static. It changes over time, takes different forms.
So, while maybe not the dominant cause of all war throughout history, it's definitely been a powerful factor in certain times and places.
Absolutely. And the idea of holy war itself isn't monolithic either. It looks different across various traditions.
Yeah, let's touch on that. Ancient Greece had its sacred wars around Delphi.
Right, tied to a specific holy site.
And the Hebrew Bible has the concept of holy war, but Reuven Firestone argues it's often about preserving the religion and the people within a specific land.
Yeah, he makes that key distinction. It wasn't necessarily about global conversion like some later Western ideas, more about defense of identity and territory.
Like the Maccabean Revolt.
A good example, yeah. Or the Jewish-Roman Wars.
Then early Christianity, Edward Peters points out, didn't really start with a holy war concept. Augustine's just war theory was more the framework.
Right, focusing on ethical justifications for war in general. The idea of bellum sacrum, fighting enemies of God, developed later.
Which eventually led to things like the Crusades, where fighting was even seen as like a form of penance. That's a huge shift.
A very significant theological development. And then you look at Hinduism.
With Dharma Yuddha.
Right, but that's more about the rules of righteous warfare, the
Right.
ethics of how you fight justissance in bello, not necessarily that the war's cause is inherently religious.
So the epics, like the Mahabharata or Ramayana, they're presented more as conflicts over inheritance or abduction?
Primarily, yes, according to the source material, not driven by religious difference itself.
Okay, what about Islam?
Well, military jihad emerged after Muhammad's migration to Medina. Early Quranic verses talk about the right to fight back against persecution, against those who'd wronged them.
Self-defense initially.
That's how it's often framed. And Sikhism has Dharamyud,
A war for righteousness.
or justice, yeah, but explicitly as a last resort only after all peaceful options have failed.
It's fascinating how each tradition has these nuanced approaches. Holy war definitely isn't just one thing.
Not at all. It highlights the specific contexts and justifications within each faith.
Okay, let's pivot to some historical flashpoints. Where did religion really seem central?
Well, the Christianization of Europe was often violent. Think of Charlemagne's Saxon Wars.
Right, described as both expanding frontiers and fighting devil worshippers.
Exactly. Religion and conquest intertwined. And Clovis III's wars against Arian Christians were explicitly about establishing Catholic dominance.
And then, of course, the Crusades. A prime example, even if we know politics and economics were mixed in.
Absolutely. Pope Urban II calling for a bellum sacrum to retake the Holy Land is pretty central to the Holy War discussion.
The Reconquista in Iberia, too, right?
Yeah.
Especially with those Christian military orders. They seemed pretty committed to the religious angle.
They definitely were, though motivations likely varied among other Christian forces involved.
Then you get complicated cases like the Hussite Wars.
Oh yeah, super complex. Was it about who inherits the throne? Was it Jan Hus's theological ideas? Was it emerging Czech nationalism? Probably all of the above.
A real tangle. And even in early Japan, that Soga Mononobe conflict shows how introducing Buddhism clashed with existing Shinto beliefs, and crucially, the power structures tied to them.
Religion and political power struggles going hand in hand. We see that pattern a lot.
Definitely. Like in the Toltec Empire, wars between followers of Tezcatlipoca and Quetzalcoatl.
Right. And then the European wars of religion, Catholics versus Protestants.
Though even there, politics messed things up, didn't it? Catholic France backing Protestants in the 30 Years' War.
For strategic reasons, yeah. Shows it wasn't always purely about theology. Historians still debate if the English Civil War was maybe the last of these big European religious wars.
And one stark example of religious aims, the Ethiopian Adal War. The goal was explicitly to extinguish the Christian kingdom and convert people to Islam.
A very clear case of religiously motivated conquest.
Moving closer to our time, religion doesn't just disappear as a factor, does it?
Not at all. Though often it's tangled with nationalism, ethnicity, resources, you name it.
The Greek War of Independence, for instance.
Yeah.
Some definitely viewed it as Christians versus Muslims, a holy war.
Yeah, the Greek Declaration of Independence even invoked religious justifications.
And the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
Yeah.
It's fundamentally about land, identity, nationalism. But religion is deeply woven in, especially around holy sites.
Undeniably, both sides often frame aspects of it in religious terms. It adds another layer of intensity.
The partition of India and Pakistan. A tragedy fueled directly by religious difference, leading to horrific violence.
A devastating example of religious identity becoming the dividing line.
And conflicts in Nigeria often have religious undertones, clashes between Christian and Muslim communities, even if ethnicity and resources are also key.
Right. Or the Buddhist uprising in South Vietnam, a reaction to discrimination against the Buddhist majority by the Catholic government.
It shows how religious identity can become a rallying point against perceived injustice.
Even in China, the conflicts involving Hui and Uyghurs, both Muslim groups, have complex roots. It's not just religion, it's race, class, state control.
So shared religion doesn't guarantee peace.
Clearly not. Then there's the Lebanese Civil War, fought largely along religious sectarian lines, Sunni, Christian, Shia.
A classic example of political conflict mapping onto religious identity.
And the Iran-Iraq War. Iran framed it partly as jihad, a religious war. Iraq focused more on Arab nationalism.
Although even secular Ba'athist Iraq started using religious symbols later on.
It did, yeah. Trying to rally support. Shows the power of religious symbolism even when the state ideology isn't religious.
The Yugoslav wars, too. Seen by many as religious conflicts, Orthodox Serbs, Catholic Croats, Muslim Bosniaks, religious symbols were everywhere.
Again, deeply intertwined with ethnicity and competing nationalisms, but religion was a key marker of identity and difference.
And finally, the Second Sudanese Civil War, often described as ethno-religious, stemming from the central government trying to impose Sharia law on the non-Muslim South.
A clear case where imposing religious laws sparked a massive conflict.
So looking back across all this, wow, it's incredibly complex.
It really is. While religious difference can absolutely be a powerful motivator, a justification, it seems it's hardly ever the only cause.
It's almost always this tangled web: faith, power, ethnicity, land, money.
Exactly. And like we talked about right at the beginning, even defining what a religious war is, well, scholars are still arguing about it.
So what does this all mean for you, our listener? It really seems that while religion can be this potent force, sometimes igniting conflict, sometimes escalating them,
It's almost never the sole spark. To really get a handle on these holy wars, you have to dig into the specific history, the context, all the interacting factors.
yeah. This deep dive really shows that the link between faith and fighting is way more nuanced than simple labels like religious war suggest. It often reflects these broader power struggles in societies.
It challenges us, doesn't it, to look beyond the easy answers and think about the deeper, often really tangled motivations behind these conflicts.
It really does. And maybe it raises a final thought for you to consider.
Mm.
In a world where religion is still such a core part of identity for billions, and where resources are scarce and political tensions run high,
Yeah.
how do we learn from this history? How do we stop these powerful forces, faith, identity, power, from combining in ways that lead to violence again? Understanding the complexity seems vital.
That's a critical question. Maybe recognizing how easily religion can be intertwined with conflict and being wary of simplistic narratives is part of the path forward.
Thanks for listening. Write us in the comments your opinion on the episode and what other topics you would like us to talk about. Subscribe to the channel to help us reach more listeners. Thank you and have an amazing day.